Hello, everybody. How are you guys tonight? It's so good to see you all. Hey, Dee. Hi, Annie. So good to have you here. John, how are you? Hi, American Girl. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I forgot to change my thumbnail. I do apologize, but you haven't missed anything. Hey, little Pookie, how are you? Hey, WL22, thank you so very much. That was kind of you. Hey, Y, how are you? Digital, it's so good to see you. Hi, country girl. I'm glad you guys are all here tonight. I know on Wednesday or Thursday, I think it was, I talked to everybody about my special guest that I'm going to be having. Unfortunately, had something come up this weekend, so it's not going to be this weekend, but it's going to be very soon. So we can look forward to TCJ coming on my show. I'm really excited about it. Hey, Maria. How are you, my dear? So good to have you here. And you too, Pookie. It's always good to see you here. So, couple things I'm going to do. First thing I want to talk about is I want to tell everyone who's been sending me emails and all kinds of messages on my reaching 1,000 subscribers. I just couldn't have done it without all of you. So I really, really appreciate all of you getting me there. Yeah, I'm just really excited. We're growing and people are interested in what our channel and community has to say, and that's exciting. And I hope to continue to be able to bring you really good informational content, as well as some really good speakers. I'm always looking to do some interviews, and I've got some irons in the fire, so to speak. So hopefully those are going to all work out as well. And I think we all like to see new and different faces. I'm getting my membership set up on my channel. One of the things that I'm going to do with my memberships is I'm going to add on one of the tiers a ability for members to actually sit on a panel with a guest. I thought that would be a really neat and different idea because we don't see that a lot. A lot of times I think we see creators on panels, but we don't get to see subscribers as much. And I have some of the best people who show up for me every single live. You guys have great comments, insights into the cases that we talk about, and I just I want to pay that back to you. I want you guys to be able to have a voice when we talk about this stuff. Hey, Olivia. Hi, Mary Flynn. It's good to see you guys. It was funny. I was talking to Gonzo a little while ago, and he loves the Cubs. It's his favorite baseball team. And my favorite team is the Dodgers, and the Dodgers just beat the Cubs. And so we were talking about that. I love the Cubs are my second favorite team, so it's kind of bittersweet, but that was a fun conversation with him. So, what else I wanted to talk about? I'm going to be setting up some badges and some emojis that you guys will be able to use. This stuff takes so long to do. I apologize. I know it's just been a really hectic few days for me. My family has been super, super busy. It's just a really big month for us. May is. There's just a lot going on. So, he is not a bounty hunter, Pookie, at all. He is not. He does everything he does out of the goodness of his heart. He doesn't get paid for it. He actually goes to crime scenes and does searches for missing people. He has actually found a missing person. It was a case in Texas. So, yeah, he's very active in that way. He will go out to the area where the person went missing, and try to get his feet on the ground with the community, by talking to friends, family, and people in the community, and build a rapport and a relationship with them. He was able to do that on the Summer Wells case. He actually was in Summer's house, and he talked to her parents. So, yeah, he's hands-on, and he does it all behind the scenes. He doesn't bring it into YouTube and talk about it. So, hey, Jane from the country. Good to see you. So glad to have you here. But yeah, he's a really great person and a really great guy. But that's what's happening here with the channel. And I did want to talk a little bit about hold on one second. I just need to do something here real quick. Just give me a sec, guys. So, anyway, where was I? I apologize. Got sidetracked there for a second. Someone sent me an email and I needed to respond to that. So I think what my schedule is going to be, I'm going to try to do lives, and I've been trying to stick to that schedule pretty well. I'm going to do them on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Tuesday and Thursday nights, and one of the weekend nights, either Saturday or Sunday, depending on what may or may not be going on. I like the 8 to 8:30 time. It works really well for me. You guys let me know. If you guys want to see a different time, if it's easier for you guys to get to, please let me know. I'm going to try and do, I think maybe possibly an afternoon live stream once in a while and see how that goes. Because I would like to be able to get some of my subscribers who are in other international time zones to be able to be here, because it's really hard for that. So oops, hold on. I want to turn off my phone so my Discord stops going off. We've had some really strange weather here. It was really rainy for the last few days and then got really nice today. Was able to get the grass cut. And but we had a lot of rain and it had gotten chilly again. It was like getting down into the 40s at night and only getting up in the 50s, and it was wet and cold. And this week we're going to have 90s, they're saying, Tuesday and Wednesday. So we're going from 50s to 90s like overnight. So it's I'm kind of like, we don't need 90-degree weather in Illinois in May. That is way too warm and way too early. It makes me fearful for what August is bringing. Hi, Melodramatic Monday. That's an interesting thought. Excuse me. But anyway, those are some of the things, housekeeping things that I wanted to talk to you guys about before we get into the live, really. Hey, Lisa. I have not heard about that. If you shoot me an email, I'll take a look though. So I thought that we would talk, first thing I'd like to talk about is CrimeCon. I just thought we would touch on it a bit. I don't know, has anybody in here ever gone to CrimeCon before? Do you have an interest in going to CrimeCon? If you've been to CrimeCon, drop a 1 in the chat. If you have an interest in going to CrimeCon, drop a 2. If you think CrimeCon should not happen at all, drop a 3. Because I know a lot of people are against it completely. I'm just kind of curious as to where everybody stands on it. But CrimeCon happened this past last weekend in Las Vegas. Yeah, it is. It's going to be in Florida next year, and I think I'm really would like to try to go. It just really looks like something I would really like to try to do, but we will see what next year brings. But yeah, it looks kind of pricey for sure. I don't know if it was that way because it was in Vegas. I really don't know how to think about that. So Mary, CrimeCon is, have you ever heard of Comic-Con? It's like a convention for CrimeCon was started by families, I believe. Hold on a second. Let's see what they say, what it was started about. Let's see. So this is what it says on their website. It says, true crime is so much more than murder recreations and dramatic courtroom showdowns. The genre is rich with real-life stories of triumph and tragedy, heartbreak and heroism. It runs the gamut from the criminal mind to the criminal act to the criminal justice system leaping into action. It's about psychology, victimology, and methodology. It covers seemingly unrelated disciplines as wide-ranging as science, art, and history. And it's always changing. It's evolving and mirroring what is happening in society at large. And that is where CrimeCon comes in. From the latest cases to the latest scientific techniques, from the newest TV shows and documentaries to the best podcasts in the world, and from deep dives into topics you didn't even know existed to big ballroom sessions with personalities that you watch every week. CrimeCon is the platform that delivers it all. The events are equal parts of education and experience. We work hard to curate a wide-ranging program that has something for everyone and that combines hands-on learning with plenty of chances to have fun meeting speakers, podcasters, and other fans. Despite that, hardly a day goes by that our team doesn't think about the fact that the things we cover often involve the worst day of someone's life. Respect for victims, families, and law enforcement is always at the forefront of everything we do. We've been humbled by the reaction to CrimeCon so far. We hope to bring our events to more cities so that even more fans of this dynamic genre will have a chance to experience all that true crime has to offer. So that's basically what it is. From what I had heard, it was originally started by families of the missing and victims of crime. So it was a way for them to get their stories out there. It was very expensive to watch it online this year, Annie. I looked into that and I was like, wow, that's really expensive. But they had a really good schedule. So on Friday, everybody, Gray Hughes was there, and he basically did live streams throughout the whole weekend, and he walked around with his phone streaming live, and you got to really see how it's all set up, everyone's booths, and all of that. So if you guys have an interest, you can go to Gray Hughes Investigates and look at his live streams from CrimeCon, because he's got an interview with Kelsey over there that he did, because Delphi had its own booth, and Tara was there, Kelsey, obviously Mike and Becky, and they gave out, or sold, I should say, t-shirts, and gave out, I think, the wristbands, and talked about, they had the flyers, of course, and talked about the case, with people that stopped by the booth. So on Friday, they had a welcome to CrimeCon, and that happened at noon, and then they had a case file presentation about The Real Killer. It's The Real Killer podcast, and it's on iHeartMedia if you guys want to check it out. But it was one of the most gruesome crimes in Missouri history. In 1982, Joanne Tate and her two young daughters, Melissa and Renee, were savagely attacked in the middle of the night. Joanne dies, and the girls barely survived. And a month later, Melissa identified Rodney Lincoln, one of Joanne's ex-boyfriends, as the killer. 2 trials later, Rodney is found guilty and sentenced to 2 life terms plus 15 years in prison. And then in 2015, 32 years after Rodney was convicted, Melissa recants and says that Rodney did not do it. And so who is the real killer? So there's a daytime Emmy-nominated producer and the host of the Real Killer TV show, Leah Rothman. She maps out the story from its gruesome beginning to the bombshell revelations exposing multiple miscarriages of justice and a killer possibly still on the loose. And they basically reunited and gave their firsthand accounts on the case. Melissa was there. Rodney Lincoln was there. And it's like this whole thing spans like 40 years. It's shattered, shaped, and made warriors of both of them individually and together. Rodney's daughter, Kay Lincoln, was also at CrimeCon to discuss the shocking details that she uncovered during her intense fight to prove her father's innocence, including witness manipulation, missing evidence, and police and prosecutorial misconduct. And there was a way for the people that were in the audience to join in the discussion and talk about these wrongful convictions and what it means to stand up when those in charge have got it wrong. I think that would have been a really, really incredible thing to listen to. I would have liked to have been there to listen to them. They also had a session on bringing them home behind the scenes with the DNA Doe Project. The DNA Doe Project is one of the projects that I would like to give to on a monthly basis. Like we talked about the revenue that I may make off of the channel from memberships and super chats and stuff like that, that we would donate once a month to a worthwhile cause. And I think the Doe Project is a really, really good one. But it was founded in 2017 for those of you that are not aware, and it's a nonprofit organization. DNA Doe has played an instrumental role in the identification over 75 Jane and John Does, many of whom had remained nameless for decades. Pioneers in the field of investigative genetic genealogy, the Doe Project was the first organization in the world to identify human remains with the use of this now rapidly growing technology. Investigative genetic genealogy is arguably the most significant breakthrough in the history of forensics and crime fighting since the creation of the National CODIS DNA database in the 1990s. Thank you so much, Maria. I love you. You're so wonderful. DDP has assisted with the identification of numerous homicide victims. Wayne Alexander, which was John Wayne Gacy's victim number 5, Tamara Teagard, Lime Lady, Dana Dodd, Lavender Doe, Pamela Buckley and James Freund, the Sumter County Does, Wendy Stevens, one of the Green River Killer victims. I think it was victim 10's bones. However, whether a high-profile case or a lesser-known victim, DNA Doe believes every person deserves to have their name restored. And in this session that they did at CrimeCon, they went behind the scenes to explain how they've been so successful in their missions. And they described the investigative genealogy process from start to finish, detailing the twists and turns of recent success stories. And they described the challenges of particularly difficult cases. I just think that that is such a wonderful mission that they have, to bring these unidentified bodies, giving them back their voices and giving them back their face. I guess that's just the way I look at it. It's just heartbreaking to know that you have this body and you don't know who this person is, or you have these bones and you don't know who these people are. It's sad. They also had the art of the interview, and I think I would have loved to have sat through that one. And it was how to get to the truth if you're a criminal. Phil Waters is not the detective that you'd want to see across the table from you. As Investigation Discovery explained when they launched his series, The Interrogator, with a calm but stern demeanor, Phil uses strategic lines of questioning to lay out the facts his team has cultivated during their investigation. backing the perpetrator into a corner where they know they have no option but to tell the truth. Throughout his career, this former Houston Police Department detective and expert interrogator had a 96% solve rate on his cases. Of those, a remarkable 90% were a result of a suspect confessing. Walters will show attendees the art of the interrogation and give us all a front row seat to how you get a suspect or anyone to open up and start talking. And he also showed a video from one of the most interesting interrogation sessions of his career to break down his tactics and techniques and demonstrate the art of the interview. Wouldn't that have been a cool thing to set through? Because it's kind of like you really get a bird's eye view of what it's like to be a police detective in an interrogation room with those suspects. There was another one on the first day that I thought, I mean, I would have been so busy trying to get to these. There was another one that they had that's called How to Spot a Liar in 7 Seconds or Less. I think that one is extremely useful, not only when we're talking about true crime, but how just in our everyday lives dealing with people. Digital, I was thinking the exact same thing when I was going through this stuff. I was like, man, Delphi could really use some of these people and their expertise. Susan Constantine is one of the world's leading authorities on body language as it pertains to deception detection. And she's made over 1,000 media appearances on TV and in print and is often engaged to teach government agents to detect deception through the 5 channels of communication: the face, body language, words, tone, and space. And in the session Susan led, she gave an introduction to the skills needed to spot the verbal and nonverbal clues of a deceptive person. She taught proven techniques that have been validated in science and vetted in the field. She also taught the basics of detecting deception through both the written and spoken word. Using video of suspects in high-profile trials, Susan broke down the body language, words, and voice so that attendees could see all for themselves exactly how to spot a liar in 7 seconds or less. And I just thought that that was really cool. And she paired also with the retired homicide detective from Houston, Phil Waters. We Know You Are Lying. In that workshop, they went deeper into the techniques used by both Susan and Phil when they asked questions, and perhaps even more importantly, listen to the answers to the questions. And that's important because I think when we talk about Delphi and we're sitting here going back to the interrogation of Kegan Kline and we're dissecting that interrogation, to be able to know how to spot a liar in 7 seconds would be extremely useful. And I think that a lot of us think that we know when we think he's lying, or we know when we think he's being truthful. But in reality, we may not. And we may be looking at it all wrong because we're not experts. So I just thought that that would be something really interesting to learn about. So again, her name is Susan Constantine. So if you guys want to go out and look her up, she's got a lot of information out there. The investigative genetic genealogy, the secrets behind the magic. And it does seem like it's magic, doesn't it? Really? when a small sample of DNA taken from a crime scene or piece of evidence can be induced to give up the name of a suspect, even when a crime is decades old and seems unsolvable. But as the Golden State Killer prosecutor Anne Marie Schubert said when she announced the arrest of a suspect on April 25th, 2018, the answer has always been in Sacramento. We all knew we were looking for a needle in a haystack, but we also knew the needle was there. And I think that that speaks to Delphi. They're looking for a needle in a haystack, but they know the needle is there. And I think that at this point, they know who the needle is, but that's, that's where I'm at with that. The tool that was used to find that needle was investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. And the haystack was the thousands of people included in online DNA databases who shared the suspect's DNA. Barbara Ray Venter, who helped crack the Golden State Killer case, spoke at CrimeCon to demonstrate the specific steps that she and the other members of Team Justice used to come up with the first ever list of suspects in the case, and how that list kept being narrowed down until they finally were left with just one name. And I think that's just amazing. Just amazing. They had the homicide detectives talking about unforgettable crimes in New York City, Atlanta, and the OC. The TV station Oxygen, or TV channel Oxygen, presented this session. And in that session, they actually dove into unfathomable crimes that can only happen in some of the biggest cities and communities in the country. So I'm sure that would have been an extremely interesting one as well. They had the Real Killer podcast. They had a panel meet and greet there. Nancy Grace was there with Crime Stories. She actually had her own booth at CrimeCon. They had a session on profiling the West Memphis Three. The Truth and Justice podcast. Bob Ruff is the host. He was joined by retired FBI profiler Jim Clemente and investigative journalist George Jared, and they took the deep dive into the nearly 30-year-old West Memphis 3 case in which the teenagers were convicted of killing 3 young boys. The teenagers were subsequently released from prison in 2011 after entering an Alford plea. In preparation for the session that they had, Jared was able to obtain an exclusive interview with Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of one of the boys who was killed. Hobbs's DNA was reportedly found on one of the ligatures used to kill the boys, and he spent the decades since defending himself. Jared, who's spoken to Hobbs and all of the other key players in the case over the years, joined the team on the stage as they presented this never before seen Hobbs interview, and then in turn analyzed it. So I think that would have been pretty interesting to see as well, because a lot of us do follow that case. Dave, I kind of agree with you on Nancy. I agree with that. Let's see. I wanted to see because there was a couple of other things. They had a whole session on the Long Island serial killer, and they talked about that case and what has been transpiring with that case, which, again, it's a really sad one. They had a topic session on the missing children of Tuam. Between 1925 and 1961, thousands of children were taken from unwed mothers in Ireland at the behest of the Catholic Church. The human remains of at least 796 of them were discovered in a septic tank on the property of the Bon Secours Catholic mother and baby home run by nuns in Tuam, Ireland. To the best of our knowledge, many more victims were trafficked to the United States via forced adoptions, and many more are still unaccounted for. How were these horrific acts allowed to take place for so long, and who is to be held responsible? Hey, Tech Death, how are you? I did not know about this. I had never heard about this. I was floored to think that all of these children were stripped from their mothers, and that 796 of them were discovered in a septic tank on the Catholic mother and baby home there in Tuam, Ireland. You talk about a nightmare. The Irish government has recently passed legislation to fully excavate the mother and baby home in Tuam, a decision that could begin to bring closure to hundreds and hundreds of families. At CrimeCon, they had survivors talk, as well as the journalists who first broke the Bon Secours story and about their experiences. Just incredibly sad. I mean, wow. So that was one of the other ones. There was a session on how anyone and everyone can help revolutionize the way cold cases are solved, which I thought was amazing. They also had a session on wrongful convictions. They had the CIA presented a session on counter-espionage and identifying human weaknesses. I think that would have been very interesting. They had a workshop, a criminal profiling workshop, exploring the killer's psyche. I thought that was pretty interesting. So one of the things that I noticed, and this is just all the first day, you guys, this isn't even gotten in yet to Saturday. But one of the things that I found out about this was when I started looking at these things, yeah, it's expensive, but look at the stuff that you get to go to. And I guess you have to pick and choose the ones you want. And I just think there's some amazing people here to get a lot of information from. That was my take on this. They had on Saturday, they had a whole session on John Bonet, dispelling the 25 years of myths. Paula Woodward and John Ramsey were there for that one. So a lot of people who think that John Ramsey is responsible for John Bonet's death, that might have been interesting to be there to see what was going on and to listen to him. They had a forensic entomology session on insects and investigations. Dr. Henry Lee was there, and he spoke. Paul Holes was there. He also spoke. They had a session on the murder of Gabby Petito and how to spot domestic violence and domestic abuse. I think that would have been a really amazing one. Susan Hendricks led that one, and she said that the panel was going to dive deep into the death of Gabby and what those final days of her life may have looked like with her fiance, Brian Laundrie. And they examined the couple's interaction with law enforcement in Utah, and they focused on the signs that officials saw and the signs that were missed. The panel also put out Parents First, how they can teach children the possible signs of abuse to look for. And the panel also looked at social media and how to spot red flags in posts. Other panelists included the HNL contributor and a member of the Nevada Coalition of Domestic Violence, and a law enforcement official that was closely involved in the investigations. And Joey Jackson was there, Judy Henderson, Gene Casares, and Brandon Ratcliffe. So that's who was on that panel. And I think that that would be so interesting, because we've all been super critical of law enforcement in so many different theaters and so many different ways. And Gabby Petito is no different. We all saw that interview, or not interview, that video of law enforcement in Utah pulling them over that day. And all of us are sitting here thinking, good Lord, what are they doing? You know, to hear the experts break that all down for us would have been really, really interesting. I think we could have learned a lot. They had a session on Dateline, what's next for the true crime original. They talked about how news magazines, podcasts, streaming, and everything has changed the genre of true crime and where it's headed in the future. I think that that is really interesting as well, as to what's the future holds for this genre that we're in. They had a session on manipulation of the mind, which also sounded really interesting, since I have a bit of a psychology background. Psychological manipulation is a type of interpersonal interaction that is meant to alter the belief or conduct of another by means of deceptive, false, or harassing strategies. I think we all can say that there's been a little bit of that going on around Delphi and this case, both in, on Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. We've had harassing strategies and people trying to alter the beliefs or conduct of others. The manipulator usually escalates his or her interactions, usually resulting in victimization of another person. These techniques might be considered as devious, violent, exploitive, or deceitful, and influence isn't always damaging, but in some situations it can be detrimental to the victim. So they talked about the various techniques used to manipulate another and how to spot manipulation in order to avoid victimization. They had an expert, Dr. Kimberly Masnick. She's a victimologist and criminologist. She's written and interviewed hundreds of inmates and thousands of correctional officers, not to mention a seemingly infinite number of regular citizens. She said, from our own children to the serial killer to those who write inmates, the ultimate question is who hasn't been a manipulator or the subject victim of one. So she shared some of her written communication with inmates as well as victims. And she showed people at CrimeCon how to spot the manipulative techniques that were being used. So I think that would be extremely beneficial because we've all probably been manipulated at one point or another or deceived. And wow. So that's pretty much what happened on Friday and Saturday. On Sunday, they had a session with Dr. Cecil Wecht, and he is a renowned forensic pathologist. And they looked at some of his most famous and controversial cases. He was a consultant on the assassination of JFK, Robert F. Kennedy, the deaths of Elvis, Kurt Cobain, the murders of John Benet Ramsey, Rebecca Zahow, Lacey Peterson. He has conducted over 21,000 autopsies and consulted and worked on over 42,000 additional cases. And if you've not seen him or heard of him, I don't know how that could possibly be, because he's everywhere when you talk about forensic pathology. He is just world renowned. That would have been an extremely interesting session, in my opinion. So that's pretty much what went on. They did have on Sunday a session on Jeffrey Epstein and the rights of his victims. They had something on the twin Tinder swindles and swindler. I think that would have been an interesting one. They also had one on the complexity of grief and trauma in the public eye. And that's one of the things a little bit that Fig and I touched on a little bit on Thursday when we were talking about how families try to cope with all of this stuff when it's all out there in the public. And the person who held the session was Kim Goldman, and she's the one who lost her brother Ron Goldman in 1994, leading to a life that was not at all what she planned. And if you remember, Ron Goldman was killed along with O.J. Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. And what Kim had to say was, the things that have always kept me grounded are the love and the loyalty for my brother, and the desire to help make the path to healing easier for those who inevitably will follow in our footsteps as victims of violent crime. It hasn't always been the smoothest of rides, but with the support of friends, family, a good therapist, and the passion for change, I have figured out a way to face each and every day. And everybody said that Kim's raw and emotional presentation at CrimeCon in Austin still lingered with everyone to this day. The silence in the room as Kim played the voicemails from her brother still gave everyone chills. This year for CrimeCon 22, Kim will be peeling back the curtain to show what it's like to grieve for decades in the public eye. She's a victim's advocate, and she took everyone behind the scenes of high-profile cases and shared firsthand experiences from victims and their families. Understanding the complexity of grief and trauma is essential for those with a curiosity for true crime. And I can't say this enough, but that is the truth. To me, right there, it just sums it up. You have to understand the complexity of grief and trauma for anyone who's following true crime, because otherwise you have no empathy. So that would have been a really good session as well. So that's pretty much what happened at CrimeCon this year. And I thought that it would be neat to just kind of go over that a little bit and see what we missed. And to also give you a little insight in, yes, it's expensive to go, but I think you might learn a lot. and it might be well worth what you have to pay to go. So that was my feeling on it. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the homicide crime scene. The homicide crime scene is without a doubt the most important crime scene a police officer or investigator will be called upon to respond to in their career. And because of the nature of the crime, death by violence or unnatural causes, the answer to what has occurred can only be determined after a very careful and intelligent examination of the crime scene and after the professional and medical evaluation of the various bits and pieces of evidence gathered by the criminal investigator. These bits and pieces may be in the form of trace evidence found at the scene, statements taken from suspects, direct eyewitness accounts, and the autopsy results. Homicide investigation is a highly professional and specialized undertaking, which requires years of practical experience coupled with a process of continual education and training. However, homicide investigation is not the exclusive purview of the investigator. Successful homicide investigation often depends on the initial actions taken by the patrol officers responding to any given scene. The object of this, excuse me, sorry. The object of this conversation we're having tonight is going to be to address the important initial actions that must be undertaken at a homicide crime scene. Because when we talk about Delphi and we talk about what happened in those woods on February 13th, 2017, when Abby and Libby went missing and the police arrive a little bit after 5, the first officers, what happens at that moment is absolutely critical to the investigation and where we are 5 years later. And we have to accept that, and we have to know that. The 3 basic principles involved in the initiation of an effective homicide investigation are as follows. Number 1 is the rapid response to the homicide crime scene by patrol officers. This is imperative in order to protect evidentiary materials before they are destroyed, altered, or lost. Now, we all know the girls were missing. We all know that on February 13th, it was not determined a homicide. We know that people were out there in the woods. They were disturbing an actual crime scene without anyone knowing that it was a crime scene yet. So obviously, evidentiary material could have been destroyed, altered, or lost. What happened on the 14th when they came across the girls and actually found them? It's imperative that that crime scene be cordoned off and no one allowed to go into it. And the crime scene in this murder investigation of Delphi is not just where the girls' bodies were found. Sadly, this crime scene is huge. We have the bridge, we have the trail, we have the area at Freedom Bridge, we have the CPS building where a vehicle has been sighted. We have a very large crime scene. And in my opinion, that crime scene was not secured the way it should have been. There were people tramping around and walking around and going all around in there. So we have no idea what might or may or might have been lost due to that. The next basic principle is anything and everything should be considered as evidence. Whether this evidence is physical or testimonial, it must be preserved, noted, and brought to the attention of the investigators. The only evidence collected at this point of the investigation is eyewitness accounts or spontaneous statements of a suspect at the scene. After the scene is secured, immediate and appropriate notification must be made to the homicide investigators. The importance of preserving the homicide crime scene and conducting an intelligent examination at the scene cannot be overemphasized. If a murder case ends in failure or an officer is embarrassed in court, the primary reason may very well be an inadequate examination of the homicide scene or a failure to implement good, basic crime scene procedures as outlined in this text. Now, there are rumors out there that the crime scene technicians in this case were told to stick to what they were collecting and to not talk amongst themselves. And as Perry told us, he's never heard of such a thing where crime scene technicians couldn't talk to each other. What in the world why would they do that? What would be the reason behind that? It's really odd to me. The investigation of a homicide usually starts at the point where the body is originally found. This location is referred to as the primary crime scene. The term primary crime scene characterizes the significance of the location and the immediate concern of responding police officials to this forensically critical area in the death investigation. The term primary crime scene is sometimes mistakenly used to describe where the original event may have occurred based on the dictionary definition of primary as having occurred first in the development and or time of an event. For instance, if the person wasn't killed at the location where the body was found, the location might be erroneously referred to as the secondary crime scene. And such an analytical interpretation might very well be appropriate for some speculative concept in the clinical sense. However, a more practical strategy is to focus your investigatory resources on the location where the body was found. This is where the most evidence will be retrieved. In practical homicide investigations, we understand that there may be 2 or more crime scenes in addition to the location where the body is found. And these additional crime scenes may include where the body was moved from, where the actual assault leading to the death took place, hence the bridge, where any physical or trace evidence connected with the crime is discovered. This may include parts of the body. In this case, I think we're talking possibly about a or about a shoe and clothing and cigarette butts. A vehicle used to transport the body to and where it is eventually found, or a vehicle that's an escape vehicle. So there you have the CPS building. Still, other areas related to the primary crime scene include the point of forced entry, the route of escape, the suspect's clothing, hands and body, and the suspect's residence. It is important that the responding police officers be aware of this multiple crime scene possibility. Therefore, during the initial receipt of information by the police concerning a possible homicide, the officer should attempt to ascertain the exact location of the situation, requiring police investigation and possible additional locations that may need coverage. Any item can and may constitute physical evidence. Therefore, it is imperative that nothing be touched or moved at the scene before the arrival of the investigators. If the need arises that something at the scene be immediately secured or removed before it is destroyed or lost, the officer handling the evidence must document its location, its appearance, its condition, and any other feature that might affect the investigation. The officer must be sure to inform the homicide detective of the item's original position so that it does not lose its evidentiary value. The crime scene, especially in homicide cases, is proof that a crime has been committed, and it often contains many or all of the elements of the corpus delicti and provides an abundance of physical evidence that may connect a suspect or suspects to the crime. If you can control the primary crime scene, then you're able to control your investigation. But remember, once an item of evidence has been moved or altered, it is impossible to restore it to its original position or condition. And I often wonder if some of this stuff happened in Delphi. What if they didn't secure that crime scene well enough? What if somebody picked something up, touched something, moved something? What if these officers, these first responding officers, didn't know what to do? Never had seen anything like this. What if evidence was absolutely made not able to be used, basically, because of that? Those are questions that, I have. Obviously, we won't know until there's a resolution to this case, but it is a question. The reason why the homicide investigation starts at the primary crime scene is twofold. The police are usually called to this location by the person who discovers the body and a witness to the crime, or in some instances, the victim themselves. In homicide cases, the location where the body is discovered yields an abundance of physical evidence and serves as a base of the investigation. And it is important to remember that anything and everything may eventually become evidence. The list of items that may constitute physical and or testimonial evidence is an extensive as the number, type, and cause of the homicide itself, whether it is the register utterances of the suspect murderer at the scene or an important piece of trace evidence. The fact remains that the primary crime scene is the logical and proper point to start murder investigations. How do you determine the dimension of the homicide crime scene? The cardinal rule in homicide cases is to protect and preserve the crime scene always. However, before a crime scene can be protected, it must be identified as such, which was what we were talking about with Delphi. We had the 13th where it wasn't identified as a primary crime scene. In order for the officer to make an intelligent evaluation of the crime scene, he or she must have an idea of what constitutes physical evidence and where the boundaries of the crime scene should be established in order to protect the evidence. Some examples of physical evidence which may be found at the crime scene are listed below, and those are weapons, tools, firearms, displaced furniture, notes, letters, or papers, bullets, vehicles, cigarettes, or cigar butts. You also can find body materials, blood, semen, hair, tissue, spittle, urine, feces, and vomit. You can also have impressions, fingerprints, tire tracks, footprints, palm prints, tool marks, bullet holes, newly damaged areas, dents, and breaks. Technically speaking, the homicide crime scene begins at the point where the suspect changed intent into action. It continues through the escape route and includes any location where physical or trace evidence may be located. So, for example, in Delphi, where intent changed into action, in my opinion, is in Down the Hill. Either one of two things happened. Their intent was not to do murderous harm to the girls, but they were wanting to be physically harmed in a sexual manner. Or the intent was to murder the girls. And if that was the intent, then it became action as soon as he ordered them down the hill. So it continues through the escape route, includes any location where physical or trace evidence may be located. However, the primary crime scene is always the location where the body is discovered. And practically speaking, at this stage of the investigation, it is next to impossible to know the exact boundaries of the scene. And even if a body of the victim was dumped at the location, it is still the primary focus of the initial investigation. And the best course for the officer is as follows: clear the largest area possible. The scene can always be narrowed later. So, in Delphi, when they found the girls, where was the crime scene cordoned off? Was it cordoned off clear back to the CPS building? How many people were out there? Were searchers still out there everywhere? Or were all those people pulled back? They need to make a quick and objective evaluation of the scene based on location of the body, presence of any physical evidence, eyewitness statements, presence of natural boundaries, an enclosed park, for example. Keep in mind the possibility of a multiple series of crime scenes. And, you know, I don't think we have multiple crime scenes in this case, but it's possible because we don't know for sure what happened. The homicide crime scene must be protected from entry by unnecessary or unauthorized persons so that physical evidence will not be altered, moved, destroyed, lost, or contaminated. Other police officers, including supervisory personnel who do not have a specific or valid reason for being at this crime scene, should be regarded as unauthorized persons. So when I read that, I'm like, so how many people were actually out there after they found the girls? Who were these people that were down there at the crime scene? Were there actually police officers that were unauthorized persons? Were there, who was down there? We need to know those things. Probably no other aspect of homicide investigation is more open to error than the preservation and protection of the crime scene. The first official acts taken at the scene will either help to bring the investigation to a successful conclusion, or it will negatively affect both the entire investigation and eventually the prosecution of the case. Therefore, it is incumbent upon the first officer that arrives at the scene to perform this first and necessary aspect of the investigation: safeguard the location as quickly and effectively as possible. The first police official to arrive at the crime scene is usually the patrol officer, the agency's primary crime-fighting tool, who is expected to respond immediately to any incident where there is a report of a crime or an opportunity to apprehend a criminal. The patrol officer is also the department's representative, responsible for conducting the preliminary investigation, which begins when the officer arrives at the scene. In homicide cases, the responding officer's duties in the preliminary investigation may simply be to arrive at the scene, observe enough to know that assistance from investigators is required, and protect the scene so that the evidence is not destroyed or changed. Guaranteed that when they found the bodies that day, there wasn't a patrol officer that was called. They called the investigators. They called the DA. They called, the prosecutor's office. They called everyone. Guaranteed that happened. In homicide cases, the responding officer's duties in the preliminary investigation may simply be to arrive at the scene, observe enough to know that assistance from investigators is required. However, the night before, when they called off the search, that crime scene in that area was not secured. They did not secure that scene in the proper fashion because they still had all kinds of unauthorized persons trampling all around it, and through no fault of their own, because they didn't know they had a crime scene. Scene protection may be as simple as closing a door if it's in the room where the body is discovered, or as complex as roping off an entire area of several blocks. There is no defined method or rule for establishing the boundaries of all crime scenes at first glance, and as information becomes available at the scene, various other locations may also have to be secured in order to retrieve important physical and trace evidence. Many times, officers have been at the scene of a homicide in one location, and as a result of information developed from witnesses or evidence that was located at the primary crime scene, had to immediately secure a second and third location, a vehicle, and even a building's fire escape, an alleyway used in an escape route by the perpetrator. Obviously, the best places for obtaining physical evidence are nearest to where the critical act occurred, such as the immediate vicinity of the victim. That is why they stress the significance of the primary crime scene. But you can't overlook the other areas. And the homicide crime scene has a sign-in sheet. I didn't know that. Did you guys know that? You have to sign in when you are at a crime scene. The homicide crime scene sign-in sheet has proven to be an effective tactic in securing the preservation of the crime scene. The fundamental objective in this phase of the investigation is to preserve the body and immediate surrounding area of the primary crime scene exactly as they were when the bodies were discovered. And remember, although the protection of the crime scene is the responsibility of the first officer, all officers responding to and arriving at the scene have an equal responsibility in this duty. Realistically speaking, various units and additional personnel respond to homicide crime scenes. The toughest job confronting the first officers is the effective safeguarding of the primary crime scene from these additional police officers, emergency services personnel, and other officials. Obviously, certain personnel must enter the crime scene in connection with their official duties. The first officers who are safeguarding the crime scene should identify and document the presence of these officials by maintaining a crime scene sign-in procedure to assure crime scene integrity and prevent unauthorized personnel from engaging in what I referred to as crime scene sightseeing. With over 35 years of experience, the writer of this article has come to realize that if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong at the crime scene. This is especially true at incidents that receive an inordinate amount of media attention, such as Delphi. It seems as if every official and his or her brother and or sister feel the need to show their presence at the scene. My solution to this oftentimes impossible situation is quite simple. I suggest that the officers establish two crime scenes. The first crime scene or primary crime scene is the location where the bodies were found or the area where you expect to recover physical evidence. This is the real crime scene. The second or secure area crime scene is an area set aside from the general public. This allows for all those special dignitaries and high-ranking guests who arrive an opportunity to violate at least one police line in order to establish their importance. It will also serve to keep them within an area where they will be out of the way of the actual crime scene operations and preclude any further contamination by official presence. And this can be called a security zone. When the investigators arrive at the primary crime scene, the first responsibility is to verify the condition of the victim and then assure that the primary crime scene is intact. Basically, this action is to reinforce the first officer's duty to assure crime scene protection. And this is usually accomplished during the preliminary walkthrough, as the first officer provides all of the information he or she ascertained since their arrival and during their crime scene protection phase. The preliminary walkthrough is critical since it furnishes the investigator with a sense of the event. Prior to the walkthrough, the investigator should stop and observe the area as a whole, noting everything possible before entering the actual crime scene or detailed examination. The purpose of this procedure is to establish an overview of the surrounding area and allow for recall of similar conditions and or circumstances that the investigator has encountered before. It is during the preliminary phase that the investigator is able to evaluate both the scene and surrounding area to establish consistencies and inconsistencies, which are crucial to the direction of the investigation. Additional areas which may require protection. The presence of any fragile evidence which may require immediate collection. Chain of custody of any evidence retrieved during the scene protection phase. Probably the most important aspect of the primary crime scene is that of presentation. The condition, location, and position of the body in relation to the actual crime scene usually provides the experienced homicide detective with crucial information about the event, which allows for early investigative hypotheses and assists in validating consistency or confirming inconsistency. Was the person killed here, or was this body dumped here? This is especially important in equivocal death investigations, which are open to interpretation. There may be two or more meanings, and the case may present as either a homicide or a suicide, depending upon the circumstance. The facts are purposely vague or misleading, as in the case of a staged crime scene, or the death is suspicious or questionable based upon what is presented to authorities. The deaths may resemble homicides, suicides, accidents, or naturals. They are often open to interpretation, pending further information of the facts, the victimology, and the circumstances of the event. In a staged crime scene, however, the presentation of the homicide victim and the manipulation of the crime scene by a clever offender could make the death appear to be something it's not. I have personally investigated many cases, and the truth of the matter is that initially the cases may have looked like suicides. That is why it is so important to maintain the original crime scene intact. The responding patrol officer and the detective investigator are faced with a crime of the utmost gravity. Homicides entail many possible motives and methods, as well as a variety of types of physical evidence. Practical homicide investigation really is important to the outcome of any homicide investigation. I found that article to be extremely informational. I know that was a lot to unpack for you guys, but I really truly think that understanding how homicide investigations work and what is supposed to happen in a homicide investigation and how homicide investigators work is important for us to understand what may or may not have happened on February 14th, 2017, when the girls were found, and also on February 13th, when the girls were just reported missing. You know, being a crime scene or a homicide detective where you are investigating a crime scene to determine what is to be considered evidence, as well as set the parameter of the crime scene so that it may be cordoned off from the general public to protect the evidence at the crime scene, is probably the most important job that they do in the very beginning of these investigations. They reach out, obviously, to known witnesses. They also search for prospective witnesses by canvassing areas near the crime scene. They re-inspect the crime scene to see if any evidence was overlooked. They may go back multiple times to do that very thing. But they work diligently to ensure that a guilty killer does not walk on a technicality and that an innocent person doesn't get the blame. They collaborate with other law enforcement agencies or the U.S. District Attorney's Office. They arrest the suspects. They prepare and serve and execute felony warrants. They take witness depositions. And they also prepare the court papers, including reports, subpoenas, and summons. So I know people always ask, what do you have to do to be a homicide detective? Homicide detectives nowadays in this country needs to have a 4-year degree. More metropolitan cities are requiring it all the time, that a homicide investigator's education require you to have a 4-year college degree, usually in criminal background. They also want you to have prior law enforcement experience as a patrol officer, whether it be a background in drugs, narcotics, the fraud units, domestic violence, burglary, any of that, before you get into the violent crime of homicide. But they really want you to have a background in criminal justice, criminology, and forensic science. And you can find those degrees at any private or public college these days. But it takes, after you have all those things, it takes experience. And they want experienced officers. That's why you don't usually see detectives just hired right off the street as a detective. They come in, they work for 3 or 4 years, they prove themselves as an outstanding patrol officer, and they have a very good investigatory mind, and then they're promoted. And that's at the time when they have to take and sit for the homicide detective test that they have to pass. But in 2018, it said that based on jurisdiction and what government level homicide detectives are at, the mean salary of them in 2018 was $82,020, or excuse me, I apologize, $85,020 a year. So that gives you a little bit of background on what it takes to be a detective. And the last thing I wanted to talk about or cover with this was the International Homicide Investigators Association. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but it was founded in 1988 during a VICAP, Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, International Homicide Symposium. that the FBI in Quantico, Virginia, was holding. The symposium brought together an elite group of professionals from around the world representing all death investigation disciplines. The IHIA is the world's largest and fastest growing organization of homicide and death investigation professionals. And this nonprofit organization represents the largest network of homicide professionals and practitioners ever assembled. The IHIA has representatives in every U.S. state and nations on 6 continents. The membership includes highly respected death and homicide investigators, criminal behavioralists, forensic scientists, crime scene technicians, crime and intelligence analysts, prosecutors, and others, many of whom are considered among the foremost experts in their respective fields and disciplines. The diversity of IHIA's membership greatly enhances the organization's capability to successfully address the myriad of demanding issues facing homicide and death investigators in today's world. The IHIA's primary mission is to support law enforcement death investigation professionals through the provision of leadership, training, networking, resources, and expertise necessary to solve cases. Successful death investigations frequently require interagency and interdisciplinary cooperation and partnerships. And Delphi is no different. We know that Delphi has a multi-network of interagency disciplines working together. The IHIA's multidisciplinary membership promotes interdisciplinary and interagency coordination, cooperation, and working partnerships. This basic tenet forms a foundation for conducting sound, successful, and professional homicide and death investigations. The core values of IHIA are professionalism, responsibility, cooperation, teamwork, integrity, hard work, and diligence, all of which are necessary to accomplish successful investigations. By bringing all these disciplines together under one umbrella, the IHIA nurtures interagency cooperation, professional interactions, and increased communication relative to homicide, death case management, the latest advancements in forensic technology, laboratory sciences trends in criminal behavior, methodology case comparisons to determine similarity in criminal activity, effectively handling of major cases, critical incidents involving child abduction, single homicides, serial murder, mass murder, missing and unidentified dead, mass casualties, terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, other significant investigations, and prosecutorial strategy, obtaining successful case closure and trial convictions. And to accomplish all of their goals, the IHIA conducts annual symposiums and regional training sessions. Attendees are provided with the latest advanced training in all disciplines by renowned and world-renowned experts. These sessions offer opportunities for IHIA members to present cases, exchange information, and share personal experience. Through such networking, members help one another solve homicides and other complex investigations. And the symposiums have been held regularly since the inception in 1988. They have won numerous awards, and they have assisted law enforcement in all aspects of homicide investigations and other violent criminal offenses. They are in partnership with the U.S. Department of Justice, and they have successfully managed 2 critical federal grant projects. One was to the creation of a national registry of missing persons and unidentified dead throughout the United States. And this registry would be designed to assist law enforcement in the investigation of missing people, abducted victims, runaways, and fugitives. It would provide a means for victim families to find missing loved ones and serve as a nationwide central clearinghouse for law enforcement agencies and medical examiners. The second project they worked on focused on the information and formation of a comprehensive standardized training program for conducting homicide investigations. And I thought that was really interesting because I'd never heard of them before, ever. And I thought, wow, what a great organization. And I wonder if they are helping on Delphi, or if the FBI's called them in to ask them to help. Because it sounds to me like they could do some really, really good, a lot of good there. So, but there's just so much going on out there that could help. And I get it. We've talked about this now for the last few months, that we think law enforcement is onto something. We know they're working behind the scenes diligently every day. This is not a cold case. A cold case is when you get no more new leads. Absolutely nothing is happening on the case. You don't have any police officers looking at the case, working the case, and they basically take it and put it in a box, close it up, and stick it on a shelf. And we know for a fact that Delphi is not on a shelf somewhere. So it's not a cold case. And I'm really tired of people saying it, because I see it all the time, especially on Reddit. People are constantly saying, this is just a cold case. They don't know what they're doing. And I just, yeah. I don't know if you guys saw Kelsey's interview that she did with Gray Hughes. But I think I told you that it is over there. He's got it on one of his lives from CrimeCon. If you haven't, you need to take a look at it. I thought it was interesting to get to see her so close to graduation. She's getting ready to graduate from Purdue in just, I think, a week. And she's, she's going to be a victim's advocate. That's what she wants to do. She wants to advocate for other family members that have gone through what she's gone through. And I think we've watched her just mature into this absolutely strong and courageous young woman. It's just crazy. I mean, to see how she's, she used to be so shy and reserved, and now she's just out there, able to just stand up and talk. And it's really, really a wonderful thing to watch and to see. So I really highly suggest that you guys take a look at that interview. Yeah, Daisy, I heard that the tips were over 60,000 a while ago, a long while ago. So, that's a lot of tips. That's a lot of information to vet and go through. We've talked about that too. So yeah, it's, that's a lot of information. I think it's extremely close to Zulu Tango. He said, or they say, they're just tying up loose ends. The case is very close to being solved. I think that they are making sure that they have done everything that they need to do in the case. And I definitely feel that it's very close. And Little Pookie says they have leased a building. They've gotten a special prosecutor and they're hiring more investigators, and they've gone to France. This is not a cold case. Exactly. It is not a cold case. They are busy. They are very busy. Chihuahua, she is. It's so good to see you, by the way. I'm so glad you're here. So good to see you. But yes, Kelsey's expiring. Greatest of all time. Kristen, Reddit is the worst with the Delphi subreddits, a bunch of people, a lot of words, but zero substance. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I started my Delphi subreddit 8 months ago now, Delphi's Daughters, and my subreddit is so different than the other subreddits. And I think I have like 1,600 subscribers or something like that. And I will tell you that in my sub, well, I have a lot of rules in my sub, but that people know better, I guess, than to come to my sub and just write stuff to be writing it. Again, I want to keep it facts based. And sure, you can have your theories and talk about things, but there is just some really crazy stuff that happens on Reddit. There's crazy stuff that happens on here. I had a conversation with another Redditor just a couple of days ago about this very topic, because somebody sent me a message and asked me, why is the crazy what's the crazy that's happening in one of the subs over there? And I'm like, that sub is always having crazy stuff going on in it, and it's because it's allowed. It's not moderated the way it should be, but um it's just, I don't know why people decide that they're gonna get involved in following a case of two murdered little girls, um, to only be negative and spread negativity and hateful speech and disagree with everyone and just be crazy. I don't understand it. I will never understand it. Without hope, we have nothing. Um, I would never take away hope from these family members. If that was me and my child was the one that had been murdered, I wouldn't want people to be giving up on me or giving up on them for justice. Um, Cases can take a long time to come to fruition. We all have seen that. Look how long it took them to get the Golden State Killer. It's things like that, The case will get solved. The case will get solved. But people are just, I don't know. It makes me angry. um, Yeah, Daisy, I agree. I can't imagine that they would go to France unless they knew it was important as well. That's expensive to be flying people over to France for no reason at all. So they're not going to be doing that, I guarantee you. Um, let's see. Let's see. There's my Maria. It's just crazy the way people treat the families in this case. It is. In any case, truly, but especially this case. I just don't understand it. I never will understand it. There's people around this case that all they want to do is hurt people. They just want to say hurtful things, and they don't even stop and think about what's coming out of their mouth. Um, they don't put themselves in anyone else's shoes before they speak. They just type it. They just write it. And it's just hard to be that way. For me, I like I said, I've buried my child. I know that pain. I wouldn't wish that on anyone ever, 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 ever. And I would not want to ever inflict pain on Kelsey or the Patties or the Williams, any of them. It's just crazy. Um, I like that. It's about power to all the negative people that follow this case. Also, we may not figure out why, but we will figure out who. Yeah, again, I've said negativity breeds negativity. And we've seen so much negativity in our country in just the last few years, in the hate and it's sad, but I think it spills over and boils over into all kinds of things. They've done that, greatest of all time. They've done that forever. That is just how that sub is, for whatever reason. And all I can tell you is that when you post something on a forum or on a website or whatever, and people start calling you names, just move on. Don't even give them the time of day, because if they're calling you names and they're not answering back with any substance, then they don't have anything to say. Because a good argument, if you're going to disagree with me, come with a good argument. Don't come with name calling. You don't even know me. It's so easy to call strangers names, isn't it? I mean, I don't understand people. I mean, we all grew up, at least in my generation, sticks and stones may, there you go, sticks and stones. But names are never going to hurt me. So, been called a lot of things. Digital says that I think the dog walking lady may have seen people in black on her property earlier in the day and later had the encounter at the bridge where she walked her dogs. Just my opinion. Yep, that's been out there. I've heard that as well, that there was somebody out there dressed all in black. Again, none of that's been verified, but yeah, I've heard that as well, Digital. You're right. Yeah, John, I think you're right too, because I do think that I don't think it's just true crime. I just think there's people out there that thrive on drama. They live for it, either to create it and cause it, or they need to have it in their life. And they're not happy if they don't. And if they can't find it, then they'll create it. I was just going to say that people always take it out on the family because statistically, it's usually someone who you know whenever you get murdered. That is true, that it could be that. The statistics are very high, that it's usually someone you know and someone close to you. However, when you have police officers that are coming out and saying, we've covered the family, they're not looking at them that way, then I think you have to let the police officers do their job. And since they've not named any suspects in the family, I think we need to leave the family the heck alone. That's my opinion. Until the police officers stand in front of that podium and say so-and-so is a suspect in Abby and Libby's murder, when it comes to family members, they're hands off. We leave them alone. That's just how I feel. That's how I've run my subreddit, and that's how I run my YouTube channel. And, people can have all kinds of opinions, but here in this, and this, John, here in this domain, we just don't do that. I think I want to be more respectful to the families. Yes, they didn't just have some family take lie detectors. All the family took lie detector tests. And they also gave DNA. So, yes. Because they volunteered them. The families volunteered that information. They didn't have to be asked. They volunteered. What can we do to help? Boy, I believe that. When people show you their true self, believe them. And again, when you're talking about online scenarios, that's pretty difficult because you don't know their true self. People pretend to be all kinds of things online. Let's see. Oh, we're talking about Anthony, I see. Yes, true crime, Maria, ad hominem. I want to look something up while we're talking about it, because a lot of people don't even know what this is, and I'm going to talk about it because I think it's important. So a simple definition for ad hominem is appealing to feelings or prejudices rather than intellect. An ad hominem argument marked by or being an attack on an opponent's character rather than by answering to the contentions made an ad hominem personal attack on his rival. So, what is an example of this? A classic example of an ad hominem fallacy is given here. All murderers are criminals, but a thief isn't a murderer, and so he can't be a criminal. Well, you're a thief and a criminal, so there goes your argument. That is an example. When you attack the person that's made the argument rather than the argument itself, when the attack on the person is completely irrelevant to the argument that the person is making, that is abuse. It happens in this case all of the time, and especially in the forums. And in some cases, in some chats on some YouTube channels. But yeah, I always laugh. Hey, Alexa, I always laugh when people want to argue with me, and they start attacking me, and they start calling me names or saying this about my voice or saying whatever, instead of attacking my argument. I'm like, I just kind of just look at my, and go, whatever, because I'm not going to pay you any mind. If you can't come back with an argument of your own to defend what you're believing and what you're stating, then, why listen? And so to avoid those kind of arguments, you need to ignore the character of the person you're arguing against unless it is 100% relevant to their argument, and thus your counter argument. And make sure you understand what you're fully arguing against. Make sure. And when you attack your opponent for hypocrisy or being a hypocrite, that's the very definition of an ad hominem. However, the statement instead of hypocrisy might also be viewable as an admission of a cultural valuation, which can then be used against them. So there's a lot of things, because people, talk about the hypocrisy of this or the hypocrisy of that. And I don't know. I just think we have to be careful. I try not to attack people personally. I want to attack what their argument is. That to me is more important than anything. Refuting the central point. You have to find what the mistake is you think they're saying, and you have to defend it and to explain why it's mistaken. When you are in an argument with someone and you have a counter argument, and you're contradicting them, then you need to back that up with reasoning and or supporting evidence. I think we've all said that before. Where's your evidence to support what you're saying? Where is your evidence? those are the kinds of questions that you need to ask on Delphi when you're in those conversations with people and they're saying this and saying that. You need to ask them, where's your evidence of this? Show me your source, show me your evidence. Sometimes that's very difficult to do. And when you contradict someone, when you're contradicting them, you're stating an opposite point of view with little or no supporting evidence. When you respond to the tone of a person, criticizing the tone of the writing without addressing the substance of the argument. You know, people do that all the time. They respond to tone rather than the substance. And as we just said, ad hominem is attacking the characteristics or authority of the writer without addressing the substance of the argument or the person who's speaking, whatever. And then you've got name calling, just outright name calling. Sounds something like, you're an asshat. I mean, why would you say that to someone that you don't know, that just made some sort of a post on a thread in a board? Why would you do that? I just don't understand why people respond the way they do sometimes. It's just crazy. Digital says, I think Tobe is frustrated because he wants more released. He gets the same questions repeatedly and he's not allowed to respond, and he's taken a lot of criticism for things that they can't control. I think that's true of a lot of them, not just Tobe. I think Carter takes a brunt. He takes a huge, huge beating on this case. People throw him under the bus all of the time. And Tobe's not the only one. And they all take a lot of criticism. And I'm the first one to say, we need to hold their feet to the fire. We need to keep them and remind them that we're not going to let up. We want this case solved. They need to know that we're out here and we're going to keep talking about the case. And I think that they know that. I think that they know that the public is adamant that this case gets solved. And I believe that the majority of those police officers surrounding this case want the case solved as well. Rex says, theories is what we have. Some creators only want people to agree with them, but some channels are more real and listen to others also. Well, I like to listen to others. I have no problem with people's theories until you get disrespectful. When you start becoming disrespectful to family members, that's when I draw the line. Annie says, I asked that when people say Kelsey murdered her sister and her friend, what would Kelsey's motive be? Great question. That, and where's your proof? I would just say, where's your proof? What source? Where's your proof of that? Where is your proof that she did that? Hey, from the 3021, welcome. CJK, what did you mean a Facebook group I'm in is? What were you talking about there? Little Pookie says, I do not appreciate being lied to nor respect those that know it and cover for them. Yeah, I don't think any of us want to be lied to, ever. I certainly don't. I don't think any of us want to be lied to. Let's see. I think that when we get a new sheriff, whoever that sheriff is going to have a lot on his plate, because the public is expecting the new guy to do more than what's happened in the last 5 years. And I'm not so sure the sheriff is the one that's going to be responsible for that happening. So I really don't believe the investigation is being led by the sheriff's office anymore. I believe that the state police has this case and are the ones working this case. Not that the sheriff's office isn't helping, but they're not lead on it anymore. Yeah, digital. I've never heard that either. But I will tell you this, the state of Indiana is notorious for this. They are notorious for not clearing people, and also for keeping things close to the vest. That is the way they work in Indiana. A Facebook group I'm in have many who are focused on Tony, Clyde, and Kagan, and will tell others that they have been following the case from day one and know the facts. Well, I think in response to that, I'm going to have to say that we need to be focused on Tony and Kagan because law enforcement is focused on Tony and Kagan. So if we're going to go by factual evidence and what's out there, we got to follow the evidence as it moves. As this is a fluid moving investigation, and Tony Klein and Kagan is the only information law enforcement has really put out there for us since 2019. So, I mean, you can say the facts of the case. There's very few facts out there that's been told by law enforcement. So I don't know where they're getting all their facts from, but I'm just saying law enforcement has given us some things, but there's so much out there on Facebook and Reddit and other locations and other podcasts and whatever that are speculative, rumors. We don't know a witness. Law enforcement has never come out and told us of a witness anywhere. They have never told us of one witness. So, that's where I'm at with that. Lipsha, it's good to see you. She says, I always ask, where's your proof? Kelsey is allowed to laugh. Derek is allowed to grieve privately. Becky is allowed to mention a book. These are all excuses I've heard. I know, it's crazy. I can't believe that people are all up in arms at Becky because she brought up a book in an interview. She was giving a tour of Libby's room. The book was on the bed. He asked about the book. What is the deal? I mean, I just don't understand. And yes, you are right. Derek is allowed to grieve privately. He doesn't ever have to ever give an interview, ever. The man has got to be absolutely just broken from what happened to his little girl. He loved her with all of his heart, no matter what his demons are or what he may have done or didn't do or whatever. He lost his baby girl. And unless you've done that and buried them, you have no idea how you're going to grieve. So people pointing fingers and talking about him, that's again, not their place. And, it's funny that people think that because after you do lose a child and, it is true. It's almost like people are like, you're never supposed to be happy again or find joy again or whatever. It's like, what are you supposed to be destined to, sit in the corner and cry the rest of your life? Of course not. You have to learn to live with your grief and try to get through it the best way you can. Does that mean that they will forever miss whoever's gone? Yes, of course it is. They're reminded every single day that she's not there. Every morning, every night. They don't have to think about it. They think of her all the time. So yeah, it's crazy. Lipsha, thank you so much for bringing that up. I do believe, that, yeah, Robert Ives said that he really wants or thinks that more information needed to be released. We're coming to the 5-year mark. But again, I'm going to hold to the testimony that I feel in my heart that they know what they're doing and it's strategic. Everything that law enforcement is doing is strategically planned. And I'm not one to tell them how to do their job. Greatest of All Time says, I always think of the bit that Bill Burr used to do about arguing with his girlfriend whenever she started making fun of him and not sticking to the point. He said that he would just take a knee because he won. Yeah, well, there is that. Let's see. Daisy says that she remembers hearing a year ago that the county police department and the state were not on the same page. I firmly believe that. Absolutely firmly believe that. I think that there is evidence to show, especially in the first year and a half, that we had some agencies that weren't communicating well, communicating with each other. And I believe that that is why the peer review from Georgia Bureau of Investigation was called for. I believe that's why they wanted it, to help sort some of that lack of communication or disagreement out. I think that that's one of the reasons we had that review. Because thank God they did, because I really do believe that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation is the reason why we ended up with the oppressor from 2019. I firmly believe that. Let's see. So what is this group's take on Tobe? I believe that Tobe, once this case solved, I believe Tobe made mistakes. I believe that Tobe made mistakes that he's admitted to making in the beginning, calling off the search, calling off the dogs. I believe he regrets those to this day. And I believe that he wants this case solved. Until I am shown evidence of the contrary, I will back Tobe. Yeah, exactly, little Pookie. When you guys are going places, whether it be into channels or into Reddits or subreddits on Delphi or Facebook groups, and you're not being treated the way in which you want to be treated, leave. No one's keeping you there, just unsubscribe and move on. There's places for everyone in this community. And the people that run those kinds of channels in that fashion, they will attract the kind of people that want that treatment. That's the way I feel about it. And you can just move on and, don't create drama, just move on. Hey, Grizz, how are you? I hope you're having a good weekend. Lisa, thank you. Kristen, if they are an asshat, they are an asshat. Yeah, well, I I said it. There, I said it. Jennifer says that she knows a YouTuber that treats people horribly if they don't agree with all he says. Yep, I know a few of them, not just one, that do not treat them, their subscribers and the people that come in their chats with respect. And I just think that people need to be more kind and be more respectful of each other. It's really pretty here, Grizz. I'm enjoying it so far. I had a really good day today. I had a really, really good day yesterday. My little 4-year-old grandson brought me the most beautiful orchid today and gave to me for Mother's Day. It was a super great day. I got that right before, like an hour before I came on for the live. So it put me in a really good mood. I love that little guy. Um Yeah, I heard that the FBI, there was one investigator who was on vacation that was back visiting family, and he was the actual person in Carroll County. I haven't heard about any investigation. That doesn't mean there wasn't one for sure. Um, Especially considering what we know now about all the CSAM in the area, it very well could be that the FBI was investigating. But the FBI investigator that showed up for Delphi, he was actually there visiting a family. Um, yeah, digital. I totally agree with you on that about the covered versus cleared. Um, no matter what Derek German would say, people would use it against him. And I'm sure on some level he blames himself for being so close, but not being able to save them. Becky said the same thing about the phone. Um, I've often said, I've said it here. The way I feel about Derek is that if Derek was to put himself out there um, to be interviewed or to talk, people would absolutely vilify him. They would come at him with both barrels. We know that they are already because they use everything in his past against him. Um, and it's so easy to do because he's not speaking. When there is a vacuum of information, without information and everything's silent, people will create their own narrative. And that's what they've done around Derek German. Um, we don't know all the facts of this case. We don't know what's going on behind scenes. All I can tell you is from a mother who lost her 4-year-old child to cancer and buried him, how difficult it is to live it in the public eye and to have people calling you and wanting to talk to you and give interviews and talk about how it affected you and how you feel about it and all of that, especially early on. It's very painful. And I get that people want to know, and I understand it's a double-edged sword, but everybody grieves differently, and men grieve so much differently than women. Simply because society doesn't allow them to grieve, for one. um, they have to be stoic and they have to be strong, and they have to be strong for their family and all of these other things. And I can't even imagine the guilt that he must carry around, knowing that he was out there on those trails that day and Bridge Guy was there at the same time with them, that he was out there. I just can't imagine that guilt that Derek carries. And so it's probably been extremely difficult for him. That's what I will say about Derek. Um, let's see. Let's see. Yeah, small towns are small towns, and no one thinks something like this would happen ever because it doesn't, and that's why we're all still talking about it. It's not only that, but to me, that was another reason why in the very beginning, in the very first few days after it happened, I was like, this is local. This is not somebody that was just out transient from across the country that came here and murdered these two little girls. I just don't believe it. Um, because it is such a small town in a remote area. Um, Small towns are different. they are very different, and law enforcement in small towns are very different. Um, and I hate to say it, but you have a lot of the good old boy networks going on in small towns covering for each other. That happens a lot. And there's been many cases where you can see it and talk about it. And it's been mentioned tonight in the chat about possible corruption in Carroll County. I think that there's a good chance that there is corruption in that county. Whether it has anything at all to do with this case, I don't know. We won't know until the case is solved if that's what's going on. But I will tell you that there's a lot of things that are weird and odd that have happened around this case. And it's just like when I had my interview with Perry Freeman, Cop Facts, he said it well. He said, you know, you've got to look at the murders that happened before and after Libby. There's some stuff there that just doesn't pass the sniff test, in my opinion. His as well. So, you know, if you're not aware of what those are, go out and look them, research it, find what we're talking about, because there's so much going on in that community. Hey, Aunt Clara, welcome to Behind the Crime Door. But anyway, guys, I did not realize that I was going to be on here for 2 hours. And I thank you so, so much for listening to everything tonight. I hadn't talked about Delphi for a while, so I thought that maybe we should, you know, talk about it. It's always good to you know, Olivia, I wonder. I just wonder. There's a couple of things that I have questions about. So yeah, I'm not sure they're connected, but I have questions. Yeah, Tech Death, it is a long one, and I'm sorry. I just totally, I have to start setting a timer because I had no idea. Either CJ or I'm so sorry. CJK, I'm going to be on, I usually do my lives on Saturday nights, but it'll be Saturday or Sunday. That's basically, my lives are on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights, and one of the weekend nights. And it just kind of depends on what's going on. And Aunt Clara, thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that. I'm trying really hard to give good information and keep the conversation going without being disrespectful to the families. And I love all of you guys. You guys are the reason that I'm here and the reason that I have you know, the threshold of subscribers that I have. I appreciate your time. You guys take your time to come out here and listen to me. So I appreciate it. What is this? I wanted to see what this flora question was. Where did that go? Does anybody see where's the flora question? Somebody asked something about the flora question. I missed it. Oh, blocking flora 911 call is smelly. PB, yeah, I totally agree with you. There's not something wrong with that. Most definitely. John, thank you so much. Yeah, Lipsha, time sure flies. I'm just glad that everybody, oh, you're funny. Tech Tef says, it's okay. My pigs fought. I had to do for a minute. You're fine. But yeah, thank you guys for being here with me tonight and hanging in there. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. I know tomorrow is Mother's Day. I realize that some of us don't have our mothers anymore. My heart goes out to all of you that will be celebrating Mother's Day without your mother. I will be doing that as well. It's never easy to be without our moms on Mother's Day. I also, for anyone out there that's a mom that has lost a child, I know, Pookie, my heart goes out to you. I will be thinking about you tomorrow as well. And I wish everyone else if you do have your mother still with you, please make sure you reach out to her, call her, tell her you're thinking about her if you can't see her. But I hope everybody gets to spend a good day with their family. It's a wonderful time to show love and to each other. So I wish everyone and all the mothers out there a wonderful Mother's Day. So, and hey, Maria, make sure you tell Mom I said hi. And what did this SSS psyops? Yeah, but what would be on the 911 tape aside from something incriminating to the caller that they wouldn't want us to hear aside from desperation? I have no idea. I don't think that it's incriminating to the caller. I think the incriminating part is the fact that they had a fire department 500 feet away from that house, and 2 police officers were the first ones to respond. So I think it's more incriminating to the fire department, in my opinion. But yeah, I'll leave it with that. So you guys, and to I'm going to say this too. Thanks to Wawa for posting that. Bridge guy to you will be found and brought to justice. So just know that they're coming for you. But yeah, what's Nightbot doing? Oh, it's all caps. Yeah, she did it in all caps, but it's fine. He just doesn't like the caps. But anyway, good night, you guys. Have a good weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday night.